So back up a little bit. You're on.
Okay.
Give it. So far you have one.
Can you hear me, or is it?
Let's see. Let's find out.
I hope the mic works.
Speak up.
Hello, hello.
Or just ask the person if they can say hi in the comment section.
Hello. If you're on, please send us any comments. Can you actually hear us? We just want to make sure that works. We ready?
I don't see anybody. Nobody's here. Nobody's in there yet. Hello, people. Come join us. Nobody is here. Anybody? Nobody that I can tell. Do you see anybody?
I don't even know where to look. Oh, okay.
Somebody. Dale Nagy. There.
All right. Hello, Dale. I think you're the first one on. Where are you listening in from, Dale? Where are you from? Should we go ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dale, you're the first. And today, what we're going to do is, by the way, I'm Vic from Happy Leaf. We're coming live to you from Northern Illinois. And we're a company that was started in 2014. And Dale's from New York. Are you familiar with Fruition Seeds, Dale? Is that how you became familiar with us? But anyways, our mission has been, ever since we started the company in 2014, has really been to educate those that are interested in how to do indoor gardening. So that's what really the reason inspired us to start the company. And what we realized very quickly is that the key to indoor gardening was really high quality LED lights. So ever since then, we've been concentrating on creating lights, and now we're actually making our 7th generation of light to make a light that is very reliable, very cost effective, works great to grow anything from microgreens to lettuce to herbs to beets. And I actually wanted to, I'm not going to talk too much about it today, but let you know that we are almost ready to publish our first book. We've co-authored it with Dan Shiras, who's written 41 other books, and it's going to be called Grow Beets in Your Bedroom. And it's going to, the topic is basically 4 different methods on how to grow your own food in your home all year long. So even in the summers, things like microgreens, lettuce, and herbs, you would want to grow indoors, whereas in the summers, you would typically grow tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplant, beets, a lot of those types of things outdoors in your garden. But then in the fall, which is starting soon, you can bring your gardening indoors and you can continue growing all year long. So this last year, we did a lot of work on optimizing the way we grow tomatoes cucumbers and beets. Kale is another one that we've been growing a lot of recently indoors, as well as spinach. So there's a lot of things that you can grow indoors, which in the past you would only grow outdoors. And our mission is really going to be to educate you in that book on how to do that. And the other thing I really want to stress is that please send us any list of questions, even though we may not be able to answer them all today. Over the next 3 to 4 months, we're actually going to have a session similar to this once a month, and we're going to pick topics either through questions or portions of our book and actually show you how you can actually grow these different types of things at home all year long. So that's basically what our objective is. I think today the main topic was going to be about lighting, which is really the key to being able to grow indoors. Lighting has always been something that we've taken for granted because we had the sun in the summers. And the reality is we really never had the type of lighting necessary to be able to do indoor gardening all year long. And the reason was the fact that lights weren't powerful enough, or they weren't practical for the indoor gardener because of the amount of heat they generate, or they just didn't provide the right spectrum of light in order to actually get full plant growth. So over the last 5 or 6 years, it's really become practical and cost effective to actually be able to do your own gardening indoors because of high quality light. So in the last year or two, we basically created several generations of light that can be used for almost any of the types of plants that you would want for indoor gardening. The types of plants you can't do are things like watermelons, zucchinis, squash, things that are very large plants that take up a lot of space. It would be very difficult to light. But the things that you can do are things like root plants, which is carrots, beets, radishes, turnips, spinach, which is something that we struggled with for quite a while, but now we actually have had very good luck with spinach. And kale is another plant, and actually there's a kale container just behind me. We've grown a variety of different tomatoes, and we can show you how to do that in the next few sessions as well. Certain types of cucumbers grow well. Microgreens are another thing that's happening, and those grow very quickly. There's a variety of them. They taste good. They're highly nutritious. So we can show you how to do microgreens. And obviously things like leafy greens and herbs are also some of the first things that we actually did 4 or 5 years ago for indoor gardening. And obviously the plants can also be used to grow succulents like we do here. And obviously the lights can also be used for seed starting in the spring. So you start faster than you would ever under a fluorescent light. They're sturdier plants than you would get under a fluorescent light. And in reality, I feel that fluorescent lighting in the next 5 years probably will become obsolete. So just to give you an idea of what the Happy Leaf lights look like, this is a 17-inch version of our Procyon 2.0 light, which is our newest generation light. So it's about 17 inches long. And then we have a version that is basically twice as long. And this is what it looks like. It's 33 inches long, really ideal for a 3-foot wide or 4-foot wide, for that matter, baker's rack. So what you see actually behind me is a 4-foot wide baker's rack with some of the Kratky jars that are growing under the light. So you can see what the light looks like. It actually looks like a 2900 Kelvin light. So it's very much like, it looks a lot like an incandescent light that you would have in your home. But the difference is the light is actually made up with 3 different basic colors. So there's red light, there's some blue light, and then there's some green light. And it's those ratios of red to blue to green that is really the magic to making light work very well for your plants. So We've worked quite a bit with a professor at Purdue University in the horticulture department, where they have looked at optimizing the spectrums that plants need for optimal growth. And what they found is that somewhere between 60 and 70% of the light should be red, 10 to 15% should be blue, and 20% or so should be green. And if you get those ratios right, not only will the plants flourish, but what will also happen is that you will get a quality of light that will be something you could light your bedroom with. Yes.
So somebody joined us.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Dale is still there anymore.
Okay.
So why don't you welcome them and ask them if they have any specific questions?
Yeah, I see we have some.
Somebody who joined us.
Yeah, somebody. Are there any things you would like for us to be able to or to answer today?
Type it into. Oh, okay. How much area do they cover?
So the question of how much area do they cover has to do with what you're growing. So the intensity of the light is very important for different stages of plant growth and what you're growing. For instance, microgreens can be grown in a relatively low level of light. So what you would do is you would raise the light to about 12 to 14 inches, and our 33-inch light is basically cover a 3-foot wide area or a long area, depending on how you look at it. And if you're up 12 inches, it would cover about 2 feet. So 1 foot in either side of the light. And so that basically is 6 square feet of area for microgreens. So if you have the microgreen trays that we use, you would have about 8 of them or so underneath that light. Yeah, so what we also recommend for a lot of the things that you grow is you would grow on a baker's rack. So this is a baker's rack that is 18 inches deep, and it's 4 feet wide. And so this, for instance, this is a kale plant, and it's grown in a canning jar. Those of you who have seen the Kratky method know, and this is what the roots look like. So yeah, the area that you can cover if you're growing plants like this would be about 1.5 feet by 3 feet, 3.5 feet. So that's roughly 5 square feet of area that you could have. Everything on that rack could basically be, you would cover.
How wide is that rack?
The depth of the rack is 18 inches and the width of this rack is 4 feet. So on the outer edges, you would get a little bit less light, but you can actually use that for quite a few of the ones that use a little less light, like lettuce, you could put on the outside and they still grow fine. So the intensity of the light is what's key. So for microgreens, for seed starting, you don't need a whole lot of light. There's a unit of measure called a PAR energy, photosynthetically active radiation.
Talk about the area for other different types of plants.
Okay, so
talk about microgreens.
So leafy greens, things like herbs and lettuces. The area that is on the and behind me here is 18 inches by roughly 3.5 feet. Is fine for that. And then if you're trying to grow things like cucumbers and tomatoes, you need a little more intensity of light. But typically those you grow in containers that grow vertically. So that'll be one of the topics that we talk about later this fall, and what type of containers to use for your tomatoes, your cucumbers, your beets, anything that actually is either a root plant or grows very tall. So in those type of containers, you may have like a tomato cage that goes up, and what you'll do is you'll put your light on that tomato cage and just raise it. But you may actually be more like 6 to 8 inches above the plant for something like that. For instance, a tomato, though, you actually end up using, believe it or not. So you only need one of these lights, and you raise it as the plant grows. And so basically that light then penetrates through the canopy of the tomato. And we do typically recommend, although we have grown large tomatoes before, we have found a variety of 4 or 5 types of tomatoes that are smaller. The biggest ones may be about 2 inches or so in diameter. And some of the smaller ones may be more like 3/4 of an inch in diameter, but they taste great. They produce extremely well, and you can grow them year round. This last winter, I was picking 1/4 pound of tomatoes per day from the plants that I had growing. So we had maybe 7 or 8 plants. But now that we know which ones are the best, those are the ones that we actually would plant and the ones that we like the best. And a lot of that information will be covered in the book that we'll have coming out shortly. Again, that book is going to be called Grow Beets in Your Bedroom, and it will be available on Kindle and actually through our Happy Leaf site as well. So, Paul, are there any other questions?
They also say he's interested in growing all types of plants.
All types of plants, okay.
So maybe, talk about the difference between possibly the Pro Light versus the 2.0.
Yep.
When he might want to be.
So we do have several versions of the light. We have what's called our Procyon Pro, which puts out more light. And then we have the Procyon 2.0, which I would say in general would be good for 80 to 90% of the most applications, unless you need the absolute highest level of intensity.
Which might be cannabis.
Pardon me?
Which might be cannabis.
Yeah, well, cannabis growers would probably use our Pro Light as well.
So Dale wants to know how many lights per tomato plant. What's a good size of light, and what are your options for doing a tomato plant or a plant?
Okay.
He asked 1 light per tomato plant.
Right. So our tomato plants, we actually grow in a what we call a self-watering
He lost sound for some reason.
container. And actually, I'll show you one.
Let me see when he gets the sound back.
So Dale was asking how to grow a tomato plant. So this is actually a container made by a company called Bloom, and they're in Michigan. And they make a great container for growing tomatoes in. I actually started a bunch of different cucumbers recently as well that I'm going to be growing in these containers. And this is a 14-inch diameter container. They call it their Luca planter. And we call it a self-watering container, but what you really do is you put your nutrient water down here into this opening. It's a little hard to see because it's black. But you fill the container with a mixture of coconut coir and vermiculite. So it's actually a very light and fluffy material that allows you to grow root plants. So things like beets and carrots would grow into this mixture of coconut coir and vermiculite. So this is a mixture of 50% of each type of coconut coir and vermiculite, which are available anywhere. And you fill the container up to within a couple inches of the top. And then when you plant your seeds in here, you water it from the top the first time. And that's, how your tomatoes or whatever else you may be growing, your beets. And then they will, when they bloom, what you'll do is you'll only add water from the bottom. So water will go up through osmosis and basically keep the roots nourished with the nutrients that are necessary, and as well as the water. So the 3 things that actually I should say 4 things that you need to grow properly are really the right environment, which is temperature and humidity. You need water, you need nutrients, and you need light. So with all of those, you can actually do it in your home. Your home is an ideal environment in terms of temperature and humidity, so you already have that. And if you put the light over it, you can do that in a closet, you can do it in the basement, you can do it anywhere. We highly recommend baker's racks. And the reason is they don't take up a lot of space. And now that our lights look like a regular light that you would use in your home, a lot of people are actually using these lights in their living rooms, in their kitchens, and you use them to light your living spaces because it doesn't look like a purple light that's sort of otherworldly, like some people would call. So that's, if there's an example of some type of plants that you would like to grow, Dale, let us know, and we'd be glad to talk a little bit more about them. But I guess what I'm really saying is that if you're growing a tomato what you would do is you would just use one of these 17-inch lights, and as the plants grow, you just move it up in your tomato cage. And then in our book, plus if you contacted us, we can give you the name of a few different types of tomato cages that actually would work quite well for indoor gardening.
So there's a new person joined.
Yes.
Maybe say hi, and do you have any questions?
Yep, we see.
Dale, any other questions?
Dale, do you have any other questions? Or we did see a few others join. Please send us your questions.
In the chat box.
In the chat box, correct. So again, what we're really trying to do is provide education on how to grow at home. And pretty much anything from microgreens to lettuce, to cucumbers, to tomatoes, to beets are possible. And in some of the other sessions that we're going to have this fall, we'll get into a lot more detail. The one thing that we have talked a lot about over the last few years of our company is how to use what is called the Kratky method to grow food indoors. It's a passive hydroponics method. I picked up the kale plant earlier. I've got lettuce. I've got some dill here. Oh, I'm sorry, basil here. So this basil is about 3 to 4 weeks old. You could sort of see the size of some of these leaves. And this is grown in a largemouth canning jar. And you could sort of, here, I'll take the sock off. And the reason for the sock, by the way, is to prevent light from getting into the jar where the water is and the nutrients are. If you get light in here, you'll get algae. And the algae doesn't hurt the plant directly, but what it does is it uses the nutrients, which in turn reduce the plant growth. So I'm going to unscrew this, and I'm going to lift up the canning jar, or the net pot. So as you can see, there's a net pot in here with some clay pellets. Those are just fired clay. They're also called hydroponic clay pellets. And the roots look like a Santa Claus beard. And so what happens is the roots, as the plant starts germinating, the roots will drop through the clay pellets into the water, and they will follow their water down. So as you can see, the water level is right here. And so what's happened is the roots absorb the water and the plant grows up towards the light. This process was developed by Dr. Bernard, and I guess he calls himself Bernie, Kratky from the University of Hawaii. It's an ingenious process. He actually got a patent on it in 1992. And we've been in close contact with Bernie over the last year or so. He lives in Vancouver, Washington now. Although he lived in Hawaii for 49 years, he's moved to Washington recently. And he developed this ingenious method because it's completely passive. There's no pumps, there's no motors, there's no electricity. And you could literally plant your seeds, go on vacation for 3 to 4 weeks, and when you come back, this is what you get. And Bernie's comments to us is, I'm absolutely delighted that you're educating people to be able to grow some of their own food at home. And LED lighting has now enabled you to do that. A lot of what he did when he was in Hawaii was obviously to grow outdoors, and he did it on a larger commercial scale. So we've modified the process, and several of the methods that we show in our book are based on the Kratky method. Actually, 2 of them are. And it's just elegantly simple and easy, and it's so simple to do. After you've tried it once, you'll wonder, why in the world haven't I been doing this for years? But as you can see, this is a very healthy basil plant. Almost all herbs we've tried grow really well. A lot of lettuces, there's hundreds of varieties of lettuces. The one plant that we've struggled with in growing this way, though, has been spinach. And we aren't completely sure, other than the fact that spinach has a very hard seed shell. And what we found, though, is if you grow the spinach in the mixture of coconut coir and vermiculite, that they actually germinate really well. They grow really well. And this container that you could sort of see in the background here is what we call a tomato trellis. And we use that to actually grow quite a bit of spinach in the winters. And the spinach leaves are the size of my hand. And we can harvest them once, and then the leaves that are below that will grow big again within a couple of weeks. We do a second harvest, and often we get a third harvest out of it all as well before we actually remove the roots and start again. What I have growing back here now is it's called lacinato. Lacinato kale. So there's a type of kale that we had at a local restaurant that we really liked. So we're growing kale right now, and it's about that tall. We got a question.
So Dale asked, can you grow a tomato plant this way?
Yes, yeah. So tomatoes are tomatoes are some of the last things that we've really perfected growing in. If we were in the other room in our office in the past, but it's not as satisfying as growing some of the smaller tomatoes. The large tomatoes, you may get a half a dozen big ones after 3 or 4 months of growing. What we found is there's a variety of tomatoes. Some of the names of those are Totem, Sweet and Neat, Red Robin, and Tiny Tim. So those are some of the tomato plants or varieties that we've had really good luck with.
Did you talk about the medium?
Yep, and the medium for growing tomatoes, and even the container, I had that up a little bit earlier, but the medium for growing tomatoes should be a 50-50 mixture of coconut coir, which you buy in brick. You can get on Amazon, type in the word coconut coir, and you will actually get it in these bricks. But then when you put water in it, it fluffs up. And this is a mixture of 50% coconut coir and vermiculite. And it allows you to grow not only things like tomatoes and cucumbers, but root plants. So if you wanted to do beets, carrots, radishes, anything, hey Sasha,
Sasha,
that you wanted to grow so that it can expand in the soil, or the mixture that is replacing soil in this case. But in all cases, you really are using the same set of nutrients. So this is the container, again, that I use for most of the tomatoes. In fact, all of the tomatoes that we're growing now and cucumbers would be grown in this. And you put a tomato cage around it. You'd support your lights on it. And as the plant grows, you move your light up. And it also creates a way to support the tomato and the cucumbers as they grow. If you want to grow a larger quantity or a larger area, what is called the tomato trellis, which is this large container behind me, we put that on the bottom of the rack. And the actual tomato trellis does have a trellis that comes with it, so you could support your light on it as well as your plants. But if you're growing things like kale and spinach, you would just probably put it on the bottom shelf of your baker's rack and put the light above it. And that gives you a much larger grow area. So if it's a plant that's not going to grow really tall, that's a great way to do it. The one other thing that I should mention is actually what nutrients do you use. So in our book, we will talk about 4, 5, 6 different nutrients. There's actually dozens that we've tried that work, but we try to use the ones that provide the best results, that are easy to use, that you can quickly get, and are very cost effective. So the one that we really like, and it works really well, is made by General Hydroponics, and it's called Maxi Grow, and there's also one called Max, is what you always start with. So this is whenever you're going through seed starting and vegetative growth. It has a higher level of nitrogen in it. But as your plants start producing tomatoes and cucumbers, anytime you're flowering and fruiting, you would switch to Maxi Bloom, which is a pink container or pink bag, but pretty much like this. And it has a higher level of phosphorus in it. So that's basically the main difference. There are some nutrients that we've used that are 2-part. There's some that are even 3-part. Some are liquid. Some are fully organic. Some are basically, you would call them synthetic, but they're basically basic nutrients that are found in the earth anyways. The organic ones may have kelp in them or bat guano and things like that. Not all of them work well with the Kratky method. If they have too many organics in them, they can actually degrade and smell a little bit. So you wouldn't want to use all of them. You really have to do some experimenting on those.
We're going to wrap up unless somebody comes to me a question real quick.
Yep. So, this was an introductory presentation. And what we're really asking is if you have any questions that we can answer either via email, please, log on to our website and send us your email addresses so that we can correspond and we can send you some information on the company and anything that we're doing for educational purposes. But we'd love to correspond with you, and we also will be having a session roughly once a month, and that information will be available on our Facebook page. So, what's that? Yeah, thank you very much, Dale. You may have been our main question asker today. Thank you very much.